The emergency beacon cut through the vast emptiness of space like a desperate scream. Admiral Zeth Kari of the Galactic Council's Third Fleet watched the red warning lights flash across his command bridge as the distress signal reached their sensors. His forearms trembled slightly as he read the coordinates. Sector 7, the forbidden zone where 3 civilizations had already fallen to the mysterious invaders. "Admiral," his communications officer chittered nervously, her insectoid features pale with fear. "The signal is from colony ship Esperanza. They're requesting immediate military assistance against what they call the Devourers." Zeth Kari's stomach churned. The Devourers were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. They consumed entire planets, stripping away all organic matter and leaving behind dead rocks floating in space. No weapon had proved effective against their biomechanical ships. No strategy had worked against their relentless advance. 3 different species had tried to stop them, and 3 species had been completely wiped out. "Set course for the coordinates," he ordered, his voice barely steady. "Alert all ships in the fleet. We go to maximum burn." The journey took 6 standard hours. During that time, reports flooded in from across the sector. The Devourers had emerged from some unknown region of dark space and were moving through inhabited systems like a plague. Their ships were living things, massive creatures that could regenerate from damage and spawn smaller attack craft from their own bodies. When the Third Fleet finally arrived at colony ship Esperanza's last known position, they found something that made Zeth Kari's blood run cold. The massive colony vessel, home to nearly 1 million beings from 12 different species, hung motionless in space. Its hull was covered in a black, web-like substance that pulsed with an eerie green light. "Sir, we're detecting life signs aboard the ship," reported the sensor operator. "But they're wrong somehow. The readings don't match any known species signatures." Before Zeth Kari could respond, his tactical officer shouted a warning. "Contact! Multiple bogies emerging from behind the colony ship!" The Devourers appeared like nightmares given form. Their ships were twisted amalgamations of metal and flesh, covered in what looked like thousands of eyes and extending long tentacle-like appendages. The largest was easily 3 times the size of Zeth Kari's flagship, and it moved with an organic fluidity that defied physics. "All ships, open fire!" Zeth Kari commanded. The Third Fleet's weapons lit up the darkness of space. Plasma cannons, particle beams, and quantum torpedoes struck the Devourer vessels with devastating force. For a moment, Zeth Kari felt hope as he watched explosions bloom across the enemy hulls. But that hope died quickly. The damage to the Devourer ships began healing almost immediately. Torn metal flowed like liquid to seal breaches. Severed appendages regrew within seconds. Worse still, the creatures seemed to be learning from each attack, adapting their defenses in real time. "Sir, our weapons are becoming less effective with each salvo," his weapons officer reported, panic creeping into his voice. "They're developing immunity to our energy frequencies." The largest Devourer ship suddenly accelerated toward the fleet's center. Zeth Kari watched in horror as it opened what could only be described as a mouth, a gaping maw, lined with rotating teeth the size of shuttlecraft. One of his destroyers disappeared into that terrible opening, and he could hear the crew's final screams over the communication system. "All ships, retreat," he ordered. "Fall back to minimum safe distance." But it was too late. The Devourers had surrounded them. Smaller attack craft swarmed from the larger vessels like angry insects, their weapons firing some kind of biological acid that ate through ship hulls in seconds. Zeth Kari watched helplessly as ship after ship fell to the enemy's relentless assault. "Admiral," his communications officer called out, her voice breaking. "We're receiving another distress beacon. It's not from our galaxy." Zeth Kari turned to stare at her. "What do you mean?" "The signal originated from a star system at the very edge of our galactic arm," The coordinates match a region we've designated as unexplored space. And, sir, the signal is responding to our emergency beacon. On the main screen, a new message appeared. It was text-based, written in standard galactic script, but there was something different about its tone, something that suggested its authors were not afraid. Galactic Council Emergency Beacon received. We have monitored your situation. Assistance is en route. Hold your position if possible. Do not attempt to engage the entities you call Devourers until our arrival. This is Task Force Terra responding to your SOS. Zethkari had never heard of Task Force Terra, and he certainly had never heard of any species calling itself Terra. But as another of his ships exploded in a ball of superheated plasma, he found himself desperately hoping that whoever these beings were, they knew something about fighting the Devourers that his people did not. Sir, we're detecting new contacts on long-range sensors, his tactical officer announced. Multiple ships approaching at incredible speed. Their drive signatures are unlike anything in our database. The unknown vessels were still too far away to see clearly, but their approach vector suggested they were heading straight into the battle zone. Either these Terra beings were suicidally brave, or they possessed weapons and capabilities that the Galactic Council had never encountered. As his remaining ships fought desperately to survive against the Devourer swarm, Admiral Zethkari found himself praying to whatever gods might listen that these mysterious rescuers would arrive in time. The fate of not just his fleet, but potentially the entire galaxy, might depend on beings he had never heard of from a world that didn't officially exist. The countdown to first contact had begun, and the universe would never be the same. The first sign that something extraordinary was about to happen came when the Devourers suddenly stopped attacking. Their massive biomechanical ships, which moments before had been tearing through the Galactic Council fleet like paper, now hung motionless in space. Even their smaller attack craft ceased their relentless assault and began retreating toward their motherships. Admiral Zethkari watched in stunned amazement as the creatures that had shown no fear of his most powerful weapons now seemed to be displaying something that looked remarkably like caution. "What are they doing?" he whispered, more to himself than to his bridge crew. His question was answered when the newcomers finally came into visual range. The ships of Task Force Terra were unlike anything in the galactic databases. Where most spacefaring vessels were sleek and curved, following the accepted principles of efficient space travel, these craft were angular and brutal-looking. They bristled with weapon systems that seemed almost primitive compared to the elegant energy weapons used by Council species. Yet there was something about their design that spoke of deadly efficiency. "Sir, we're being hailed by the lead vessel," his communications officer announced. "Put it through." The face that appeared on his main screen was utterly alien, yet somehow familiar. The being had smooth skin in a light brown tone, 2 eyes positioned forward on its skull, and facial features that were both symmetrical and oddly expressive. When it spoke, its voice was clear and confident. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the UES Indomitable. Admiral Zethkari, I presume. We received your distress call and came as quickly as we could." Zethkari found himself staring. You know who I am?" "We've been monitoring Council communications for some time now," Captain Chen replied, with what appeared to be a slight upward curve of her mouth, an expression Zethkari couldn't identify. "We know about the Devourer threat, and we know that conventional weapons have proven ineffective against them." "If you know that, then why did you come?" Zethkari asked. "These creatures cannot be defeated. They adapt to any attack, regenerate from any damage. 3 entire civilizations have fallen to them." Captain Chen's expression grew more serious. "Admiral, my species has a saying. The only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good beings to do nothing. We may not be part of your Galactic Council, but we won't stand by and watch genocide." Before Zethkari could respond, Alarms began blaring across his bridge. The Devourers were moving again, but this time their target was clear. They were heading straight for the human ships. "Captain Chen, you must retreat," Zethkari transmitted urgently. "Your ships will be consumed just like ours." But the humans didn't retreat. Instead, their formation spread out in a complex pattern that seemed almost like a dance. As the Devourer vessels approached, expecting easy prey, the human ships opened fire. What happened next defied everything Zethkari thought he knew about space combat. The humans weren't using energy weapons at all. Instead, their ships launched what appeared to be solid projectiles, chunks of metal that moved at incredible velocities. But these weren't simple kinetic weapons. As Zethkari watched in amazement, the projectiles struck the Devourer ships and exploded in brilliant flashes of nuclear fire. "Impossible," breathed his tactical officer. "They're using atomic weapons in space combat, but the radiation, the fallout..." "Humans evolved on a world constantly bathed in radiation from its star." Captain Chen's voice cut through their communications. "We're a bit more resistant to these effects than most species." The nuclear bombardment was just the beginning. As the Devourers tried to adapt to the atomic attacks, the humans switched tactics. Some of their ships began firing what looked like streams of superheated metal, while others launched swarms of tiny missiles that seemed to think for themselves. But the most devastating attack came from the human flagship itself. The UES Indomitable opened ports along its hull and deployed dozens of smaller craft, single-pilot fighters that moved with an agility that made Zethkari dizzy just watching them. "Those pilots," he said in wonder. "How are they surviving those acceleration forces?" "Humans are persistence hunters, Admiral," Captain Chen explained as her fighters swarmed around a Devourer mothership like angry wasps. "We're built to endure pain, exhaustion, radiation, G-forces that would kill most species. We just keep going." The human fighters were doing something no Council pilot would ever attempt. They were flying directly into the Devourer ship's defensive fields, using the creature's own acidic weapons against them by maneuvering their enemies into friendly fire positions. Several pilots, their craft badly damaged, actually rammed their fighters into critical points on the biomechanical hulls, sacrificing themselves to create openings for their comrades. "Are they insane?" Zethkari's tactical officer gasped. "No," the Admiral said quietly, beginning to understand. "They're desperate, but not for themselves. For us. They're fighting like this to save species they've never even met." The battle turned when the humans revealed their most shocking weapon. The UES Indomitable suddenly accelerated directly toward the largest Devourer ship, a collision course that would destroy both vessels. "Captain Chen, what are you doing?" Zethkari shouted into his communicator. "We call it a crazy Ivan, Admiral," came the calm reply. "Sometimes the only way to win is to convince your enemy that you're willing to lose everything." At the last possible second, the Indomitable fired its main weapon, not at the Devourer ship, but into the space between them. The weapon was unlike anything Zethkari had ever seen. It seemed to tear reality itself, creating a brief rift in space-time that swallowed both ships' forward sections. The Devourer mothership, for the first time in the battle, showed signs of panic. Its regenerative systems couldn't repair damage that had been erased from existence. As it tried to retreat, the human fighters pressed their attack with renewed fury. "All Council ships," Captain Chen transmitted. "Now would be a good time to join the fight. Use projectile weapons if you have them. Anything that delivers kinetic force rather than energy." Zethkari realized she was right. The Devourers had adapted to energy weapons, but they hadn't encountered the humans' brutal, primitive, and devastatingly effective kinetic arsenal. His remaining ships began firing their emergency torpedo stores, crude fusion warheads that suddenly seemed brilliantly effective against the confused enemy. One by one, the Devourer ships began to fall. Their adaptation couldn't keep up with the constantly changing human tactics. Just when they developed resistance to nuclear fire, the humans switched to mass drivers. When they adapted to kinetic weapons, the humans deployed biological warfare that attacked the creature's organic components. As the last Devourer ship exploded in a ball of nuclear fire, Admiral Zeth Kari found himself staring at the human fleet in awe. These beings had achieved in hours what 3 advanced civilizations had failed to accomplish in months of warfare. "Captain Chen," he transmitted, "how did you know? How did you know how to fight them?" The human's expression was grim. "Because, Admiral, humans come from what you might call a death world. We've been fighting for survival since the day our species evolved. Every weapon you saw today, every tactic we used, we developed them fighting each other." The implications of that statement sent chills down Zethkari's spine. A species so warlike that they had created weapons capable of destroying eldritch horrors, yet so noble that they would risk everything to save strangers. "Will you come to the Council Worlds?" he asked. "The galaxy needs to know about your people." Captain Chen was quiet for a moment. "That might not be the best idea, Admiral. We're still learning how to live in peace with each other, let alone with aliens. But we'll keep monitoring your emergency channels. If something like this happens again, you'll come," Zethkari finished, understanding. "Count on it," she replied. "Earth doesn't abandon its allies." As the human ships prepared to depart, Zethkari realized that the galaxy had just discovered something far more terrifying than the Devourers, a species so dangerous that they could destroy cosmic horrors, yet so honorable that they chose to be protectors instead of conquerors. The humans were going home, but their legend was just beginning. 3 months had passed since the Battle of Esperanza, and the galaxy was still trying to understand what it had witnessed. Admiral Zethkari stood before the Grand Assembly of the Galactic Council, facing representatives from over 400 species, all wanting answers about the mysterious humans who had appeared from nowhere to save them from extinction. "The motion before us today," announced Supreme Chancellor Vorthak, his crystalline form gleaming under the chamber lights, "is whether to formally invite this human species to join the Galactic Council as a member race." The debate that followed was unlike anything in the Council's 1,000-year history. Some representatives argued that any species capable of defeating the Devourers deserved immediate membership and high rank. Others worried about introducing what they called a warrior race into their peaceful alliance. "They fight like demons," declared Ambassador Krixta of the Hegemony Worlds, her feathered crest fluffed with agitation. "Did you see the battle recordings? They used weapons that damage reality itself. They flew suicide missions without hesitation. What happens when they decide we're the enemy?" "They saved us," countered Senator Yilmoth from the Core Worlds, his tentacles writhing with emotion. "When every other species in the galaxy had failed or fled, they came to our aid expecting nothing in return." Zethkari listened to the arguments with growing frustration. These politicians hadn't been there. They hadn't seen Captain Chen's face when she ordered her pilots into certain death to save strangers. They hadn't witnessed the careful restraint the humans showed, even in the heat of battle, never firing on council ships despite the chaos of combat. "If I may," he interrupted, standing to address the assembly. "I was there. I saw what the humans are capable of, and more importantly, I saw who they choose to be." The great chamber fell silent. Zethkari's reputation as a military leader carried significant weight, and everyone knew he had been the sole survivor of the senior command staff from that battle. "Yes, the humans are dangerous," he continued. "More dangerous than any species in our database. But they're dangerous the way a doctor with a scalpel is dangerous. They have the power to harm, but they choose to heal instead." He activated the holographic projector at his station, displaying a 3-dimensional star chart of the galaxy. Since the Battle of Esperanza, we've detected human ships in 17 different systems. Not conquest fleets, rescue operations. They've been hunting down the remaining devourer cells that our forces missed. They've evacuated civilians from danger zones. They've even been sharing their tactical data with our military forces, asking for nothing in exchange. The display showed the movements of human vessels over the past months, painting a picture of a species that seemed genuinely committed to protecting others. But there's something else, Zeth Carey continued, his voice growing softer. Something that perhaps explains why they're willing to fight so hard for beings they've never met. He touched another control, and the display zoomed in on Sol System, the human's home. New data began appearing, information that the Council's xenobiology teams had gathered from intercepted human communications. Their world is dying, he announced, sending shocked murmurs through the assembly. Not from war or plague, but from their own industrial development. They've poisoned their atmosphere, their oceans, their soil. By their own estimates, they have perhaps 50 years before their homeworld becomes uninhabitable. The chamber erupted in startled conversations. A species facing extinction would be expected to become desperate, aggressive, focused solely on their own survival. Yet the humans were spending their remaining time and resources saving others. They could have used their military technology to conquer habitable worlds, Zeth Carey observed. Instead, they're using it to protect worlds they'll never be able to live on. They're dying, and they're spending their last years as guardians. Supreme Chancellor Vorthak's crystalline form pulsed with deep thought. You're suggesting we grant them membership out of sympathy? I'm suggesting we grant them membership because they've already earned it, Zeth Carey replied firmly. But more than that, I'm suggesting we offer them something they haven't asked for but desperately need. He gestured to the star chart again. We have the technology to heal worlds. Our terraforming capabilities could restore their dying planet. We could give them back their future, if they'll let us. The debate that followed was intense but brief. When the vote was finally called, the result was overwhelming. 847 in favor, 23 against, with 12 abstentions. 6 weeks later, Admiral Zeth Carey found himself standing on the bridge of his new flagship, the Council vessel Unity, as it approached the edge of Sol System. Beside him stood a team of the galaxy's best terraforming engineers and diplomatic specialists. In the cargo holds of his fleet were atmospheric processors, soil rehabilitation systems, and water purification plants, capable of healing an entire world. Admiral, his communications officer reported, we're being hailed by the human defense grid. They're requesting identification and stating our intentions. Put me through to their command authority, Zeth Carey ordered. The face that appeared on his screen was familiar. Captain Sarah Chen, now apparently promoted to Admiral based on the insignia she wore. Admiral Zeth Carey, she said, and he was pleased to see what he now recognized as a human smile. This is unexpected. Is the Council in trouble again? Not this time, Admiral Chen, he replied. We're here on a different kind of mission. The Galactic Council has voted unanimously to offer humanity full membership in our alliance. Chen's expression was carefully neutral, but Zeth Carey could see the interest in her eyes. That's quite an honor. What would membership entail? Full access to Council technology, trade agreements with over 400 civilizations, mutual defense pacts, and territorial recognition, he explained. But we're also here to offer something more specific. He gestured to someone off-camera, and his chief terraforming engineer stepped into view, a tall, plant-like being whose body seemed to shimmer with bioluminescent patterns. This is Dr. Silandra. She and her team would like to examine your world and determine what can be done to reverse the environmental damage. For the first time since he'd known her, Captain Chen, Admiral Chen, appeared genuinely shocked. You want to heal Earth? We want to heal Earth, Zeth Carey confirmed. Your people saved our galaxy. The least we can do is save your world. The silence that followed stretched for several long moments. When Chen spoke again, her voice was thick with emotion. "Admiral, I need to discuss this with my government, but thank you. Just the offer alone means more than you can know." "There's one condition," Zethkari added. "Well, not a condition exactly, more of a request." "Name it." "We'd like you to establish a permanent human presence in Council space. An embassy, perhaps, or a military base. The galaxy is a dangerous place, and recent events have shown that conventional forces aren't always sufficient to deal with emerging threats." Chen's smile returned, wider this time. "You want us to be the Council's designated monster hunters." "We want you to be our friends," Zethkari corrected. "But if monsters show up, yes, we'd very much like to have you on our side." Over the following months, the transformation began. Human ships started appearing regularly in Council space, their crews working alongside alien scientists and engineers. Earth received its first alien visitors, not conquerors or colonists, but healers and teachers. The terraforming process would take decades, but for the first time in generations, human children were born into a world with hope for the future. And throughout the galaxy, species that had once lived in fear of cosmic horrors slept peacefully, knowing that somewhere in the darkness, human ships patrolled the void. The galaxy had gained more than just new allies. It had gained protectors who understood that sometimes the strongest weapon is the willingness to sacrifice for others. And in return, humanity had found something they thought they'd lost forever: a future among the stars. Admiral Zethkari often reflected on that first desperate SOS call that had brought two civilizations together. The message had been meant as a cry for help, but it had become something far greater: the foundation of an alliance that would reshape the galaxy. The humans had answered their call for help. Now the Council was answering humanity's unspoken call for hope. And in the vast cosmos, where darkness and danger lurked between the stars, that mutual aid had given birth to something the universe desperately needed: a friendship forged in fire and tempered by the shared knowledge that no species should face extinction alone.